So I'm hopefully not going to repeat what you heard this morning, because already very fluently described the situation. But I'm then going to go on to talk a bit about the wider context in terms of policy, say a bit more about some of the questions that you had this morning about the money and what's actually going on about the money, and maybe about something around the direction and flow of policy and how schools can engage with this, and also what is happening in schools now and what are some of the examples of what schools are actually doing and what works. So I will move on. So I don't need to repeat this. Chris just gave a great introduction about Young Minds. I think there is something about, we are not educationalists, but I think we share with you a very common aspiration, and that's about ensuring children can be as successful as they can be in their lives, in their future lives. We come at it from the point of view of emotional well-being, of resilience, and you come at it in terms of their attainment and education. But we are all in, both what you do is important to us and what we do is important to you, I think. So I'm going to move swiftly on because time is short. And I've just said that. So just a little bit about Young Minds. We do a range of things. We are not service providers. We want to be the honest broker, really, look at the evidence about what works, influence policymakers, government, and really be the voice for young people and parents, because often it's what they are saying about their needs and what is actually going to work for them that is the most powerful thing, both with ministers, but also is the most powerful thing in terms of what actually does work for them. We have a helpline for parents who are worried about their children, and the numbers phoning that helpline go up every year. We have, I think, over 30,000 calls now. We work locally, regionally, and nationally. So in local areas, we help develop strategies which are joined up, and we also work with schools a lot around training, provision, support, and also around developing resilience within those schools. So you've heard already a lot about what is it that creates our mental health and well-being. So I'm not going to go into this a lot, but just to reiterate, there's no one thing, as you heard very clearly this morning, but it is what we're born with. It is how we are nurtured, how we grow up, but it is also events. And this happens for all of us. Stuff happens in life. It's about how do we handle that, and how do we enable children and young people to cope with handling that, and what can we do in terms of the nurturing that can actually assist them and build up their resilience so that they can cope with those events, which are going to happen not just in childhood but across their lives. But what we've found and what we know from the research is that what happens in childhood is absolutely critical to the rest of that child's life. So this is just one thing to show the absolute impact of nurture. And brain science has actually helped what really has been, I think, for many of us, common sense over the years. But brain science in the last 15 years or so has absolutely, totally demonstrated the impact of nurture on the developing brain. And this is about synapses. It's about actually how the brain is developing and the hard wiring that goes down in early years and during childhood that actually will make things either easier or not for the rest of their life in terms of emotional capacities and emotional and skills, interpersonal skills. And so this slide is one that we have used for many years, which just shows what is going on in the brain between a healthy child and a neglected child, and the impact that has had. And we're talking about nurturing, we're talking about emotional care. In babies, just things like eye-to-eye contact. We all know now about attachment theory, but this is the impact it has on the developing brain and on all of our childhood and adolescence. This is being affected by the impact of their emotional development. So just once again, I don't want to linger too long because you've heard much about this already. But among people under 65, nearly half of all ill health is mental illness. 75% of that mental illness was visible, was seen, was diagnosed before the age of 24. Yet less than 50% of those young people received any kind of care. This is the kind of investment that we're creating and doing for our children and young people. And this is what the results of which you also see in your schools and we are experiencing in society. And overall, in children and adolescent mental health services, we are only able to help 25% of those young people who are actually coming forward for help. So this really paints quite a desperate picture and will also give some context to why it's so hard to actually get help for children. And in for government, when things began to shift a bit around recognising the importance of children and young people's mental health, was in the 2011 government strategy called then No Health Without Mental Health. And improved availability of early intervention services for children and young people could prevent 25 to 50% of adult mental illness. So what we're talking about is investing not just in children today, we are talking about investing in the whole of the outcomes for society in the future. And we're talking about those individuals, but also their partners, their friends, their families. Mental illness affects not just that individual, but the whole circle of people around them. So there is an enormously strong case. The early intervention, I cannot emphasise it enough, has been shown again and again and again through all evidence to be the key factor, early identification and early intervention. But we are very bad at investing to save. And it is very hard for commissioners to make those choices to go into prevention when they have some crises on the other hand that they feel that they have to respond to. And this is also one of the endemic problems that we have set up for ourselves. We've talked a little bit already again this morning about what is it that's going on. There has been, again in the last 10, 15 years, an increasing awareness and an increasing demand from young people for help. And politicians saying to us, is this real? Is it actually, is there an explosion of mental crises amongst young people? And certainly we have been seeing an increase in the rates of anxiety and depression of young people tipping up at A&E who are self-harming, with eating disorders that we were hearing about this morning. And in our last campaign called Young Minds Versus, we went out to young people, to all young people. We wanted to find out what is it that is concerning you today, because we know that it is these concerns that are the precursors to other problems developing. And these are the top 5 issues that young people told us, and this is over 5,000 young people. And it was a mixture of surveys, focus groups across the country. And one of the things I would like to say, some of those I'm sure you will be familiar with. I was particularly surprised, and maybe you won't be, about the number of young people who were at age 11 worried about unemployment when they left school. And this keyed into their school stress as well, but they were experiencing in their families their parents becoming unemployed, and were then worried for themselves about what was their future, what was going to happen to them. And I think we have to recognise that in this period, social media has absolutely taken off. And for young people, described as digital natives, it is just their life now. It just is part of their life. And I know certainly for me, and my guess is for most of us in this room, we are still catching up. And understanding the impact that has on young people's lives has been very significant, and we are still struggling to catch up. So, emotional well-being is central to children. Healthy physical, social and psychological development, as I've said. Talking to paediatricians, they say childhood physical illness is 9 times out of 10 connected to some emotional stress, some emotional root as well. And 60% of stomach problems that paediatricians are dealing with is about anxiety. It's got an emotional connection. It isn't actually a physical illness. It becomes a physical illness, but isn't in itself. So we are whole people. Everything affects everything else. We know that early identification of problems and early intervention and the prevention of mental illness, this is the golden egg that we are chasing, that we need to do something around prevention, building young people's resilience if we're going to have a long-term impact. We are never going to have enough services. We know what's happening with NHS and with local authorities and the cuts that they're experiencing. To expect that we will somehow have a nirvana where our services are going to cope, I think I've come to the point now where I think it's just unrealistic. We have to go upstream. That's where we can get some success, and that's where we can really make some change. And that's also where schools become so critical and important. And success at school and good mental health outcomes affect overall life outcomes for all of us. The trouble is how we operate in our services. We like to put things in silos. So we have the same child will be described differently, whether you're in social care and social services, where the talk is of children at risk, children in need, vulnerable young people. In education, you might talk about those as being children with emotional and behavioural difficulties or with special needs. And in health, those same children might be described as children with mental illnesses, psychiatric disorders, diagnosable mental health problems. And it's very interesting how language becomes an incredibly strong barrier about how we can actually work together and how we can actually share information or talk about the same children in the same way. To do with a whole complex of issues around professional background, about how problems are understood. And we need to think about how can we actually break those down and actually communicate better if we're going to actually have some joint approaches across the system and actually understand what each other are talking about. In some of our projects where we have gone into schools and also worked with local areas, there has been one of the things, the sessions we do is just debunking the language and just describing what is it that we're talking about this. What is a conduct disorder? What does that actually mean in day-to-day life for teachers? Rather than these labels that are put on that medicalise and remove, disempower people outside of those professions. And this is just showing again how little funding there is. So I won't go on about that. It is a matter of record. And this is just showing that we're talking about a whole child within a whole community. There is a pathway that we can think about around the earlier intervention, which is the building resilience and the early on activities, which need to be in a range of places where children and young people feel comfortable going. So it might be the football club, it might be things that are happening in school, it might be the faith and activities around the church. It might be anything, all of those things. They are all important about building up their resilience around coping. Within the next area is what we often call Tier 2 in the CAM services. And this is when children or young people need something. They need some help. There's something that's been recognised that there is a problem. And it can be also needing CAMs, but it can be other things too, like counselling in schools, counselling within the community. And the last area is where it is a very severe problem, and we're talking about very specialist services or inpatient care. So it is a myriad, it's a complex picture that we need to be made available. So just something about the policy context. You would have heard about the Future in Mind. We have seen a shift in government since that 2011 report on mental health, and very welcome as it has been as well. Starting off with Paul Burstow, and then Norman Lamb when he became the Care Minister, was so passionate, as Natasha was saying this morning. And so Future in Mind came in last year, a year ago now. The report was in March, and was followed by funding, which I'll talk about in a second. But then this year has been the 5-year forward view for mental health, which is about the whole NHS and the whole age range as well. And Future in Mind, all of the proposals within Future of Mind have been accepted, which is good news for us. Although it now means that it's a subsection of this overall direction of travel. But it means that we've got some hooks with which to use against government and with government and in local areas. And this is important, and it's important for all of us to remember these and use them. Some of the good things about this that was recognised was the fact that it's the whole system that has to be improved. So the transformation of CAMS should be involving the whole of the local community, the whole of that local area, and actually it should be involving schools as well. And now, I know this morning Natasha said that hasn't happened. In some areas it has happened better than others, but if you think about it, CCGs are small. They're small groups of people often. The person with the CAMS budget is often one person, and this is a part of their overall job. And within any given area, there could be anything between 10 and 30 or 40 schools that they were expected to liaise with, which just isn't going to happen, especially as the transformation plans had to be written in a matter of weeks. And they found it very, very difficult to know how should they do that, how to link in with local schools, especially when we go back to where we were talking before, when we have our silos and not good communication systems set up. And schools much more atomised now than they were, say, 10 years ago. So with very different cultures in each school locally. And so what are the ways that we can make this more efficient? And I think this is a question back and for the future, is how can we make this better? How can a CCG or a CAM service, which again can be small and local, connect in meaningfully to the schools in their area, which can be many? And when we talked about this to a CAM service, saying, you really should be doing this, you really should be having much better contact with your school. And they said, yes, that's true, but there's 10 of us, and we have to supply the whole of the CAM service. We've got in our area, I think it was 23 schools, all of them with different cultures. How do I do that? So I think there is something there about practicalities, that yes, there is a responsibility on the healthcare to engage with schools, but there is also something about logistics and about how do we do that. This is some of the things that the Future in Mind is building on. Again, I don't think I want to go into this too much, but these are the things that have already been shown to work, to be successful, and some of the things that have been trialled already, and that we know we need to ground all of this in the evidence base. The only problem being that the evidence base is pretty thin. So we also have to develop the evidence base, and that is crucial, but doesn't always catch up with what we actually need on the ground. I'm going to move on at this. Key aspects are about promoting resilience again. Promoting resilience, prevention, early intervention have come through as being very important. The trouble is the CCGs, the clinical commissioning groups, have got that old problem. Do they invest to save, or do they actually respond to the crises they've got sitting on their doorsteps? And so some of the frustrations that I'm sure you feel, and the question that came this morning about the money, is it making any difference, is that the crises always pull the funding, always. And somehow we've got to push things upstream. We've got to make sure that we are looking at prevention and we are looking at building resilience. Just a quick note on the money. I'm conscious about time. And that is that this money has been, that each year on year there should be 250 million going to local areas. Some money is going to HEE for training and workforce development, and some of it is specified, like improving perinatal mental health. We have got to keep an eye on this money. It is very easy for shadows and mirrors for it to suddenly evaporate, and it being quite hard to point the finger at it. There are mechanisms, or is a mechanism, to follow this particular pot of money, but sadly it has not been ring-fenced. This does mean that a CCG under pressure can think, oh, I can nab that bit and put it over here because I've got a big problem over here. It has also meant in some areas we have heard that local authorities are going, oh, great, well, they're getting money coming in there for mental health. That means we can take out the money we were putting into children's mental health and put it over here for this other crisis. There's a whole lot of plugging holes going on. And one of the things that YOUNGMINDS is trying to do now, and we have done in terms of chasing down where is this money going, how much has actually come, is how are we now going to hold the government to account for this funding? How are we going to make sure that this actually is spent in the way it was intended? And so each year we have, for the last 5 years, we've been carrying out a freedom of information question, and we're now just going out to repeat it again to find out how people are spending their money and how much, to check back with these amounts. But I have to say, it is a problem, and it is going into the baseline of CCGs. So it means that anything could happen, potentially, and we need to keep an eye on how this is happening. But within this, there was some good news for schools. There is an expectation that there's a named CAMHS contact in schools. There is an expectation for schools to be involved in the development of the local plans. There is agreement that schools sometimes are much better places where children can receive care and treatment, if you use that word, than going to a clinic, which takes a child also out of school and can cause all sorts of other problems. And there's also recognition that actually what is most effective is a whole school approach. Wales has agreed for all schools to have, every school must have a counsellor. And we feel quite divided about this, because whilst we actually really welcome that schools have got some resource going into this area, we really don't think that just having a counsellor is the answer. It is about the ethos of the school. It's also that you have a single counsellor and everyone goes, oh, phew, dealt with that problem. That counsellor will very soon be completely overwhelmed themselves. It isn't going to be enough, and it isn't going to work. So it is looking at the whole school and what is it, what is the ethos and culture, and what are the different range of interventions that are in that school. And coming back to the schools being involved in the local plans, I know that largely schools weren't. But this is a lever for you. It is a lever for you to demand that you are involved, to demand that they do come and talk to you, because these plans will have to be revised year on year, set for this year, but revised year on year, and there is an expectation for this relationship to develop and a recognition that it needs to. And the CAMHS contact, what's happened with that so far, is a training programme on 10 pilot areas to train up who might be the lead person within each school, who would then liaise with the CAMHS service and understand the issues, have a better understanding of the issues, and an understanding about how CAMHS operates, and there could be a referral relationship, which again I know schools find so hard very, very often. There are other things as well that are happening. So you will know about the DFE and their move to how they have framed this around character traits, attributes and behaviours. Now, we might not feel very comfortable about this language ourselves, but frankly, we're very grateful that the DFE has shifted at all into this, into recognising the importance of this. And we hope that we will be able to push them even further down there. They have also produced a variety of guidelines, and I'll just go on to those quite quickly. I think they're next, right. And the other thing that's happened about the Signs of a Shift is this commitment to make England a global leader in teaching character, resilience and grit. I like the chuckle. There has been some money also put aside now for character education grant funds. This is only short-term funding, but again, we're grateful for anything that comes down the line around this. And there is some money put aside for research into character education as well. So again, not very much money, but it is something. The DFE, and Natasha may have spoken a bit about this morning, is also looking at peer support and how that can be very, very useful, because what young people say to us and in general often is there somebody else I can talk to who has gone through something like that I've gone through? Now, there's all sorts of dangers around this. And that's why the DFE is being very cautious about what they may or may not do in this area. But one of the things that we've found at Young Minds through our young activists is that the peer support, who it also often helps most, is the person giving the support. It actually develops their self-esteem, their self-confidence hugely. And so this is a two-way, this is a win-win process. And it's also about being upstream. And also there is another bit of good news, that there is something in the Ofsted inspection framework now, which is including judgment on personal development, behaviour and welfare. Again, it doesn't have much status, it doesn't have much sway, but we are still pleased that there is something. And I think it's with the little levers that we have got, how can we shift the tide in terms of giving this area importance at a policy level. So just a few things that have come through. In terms of resources, Public Health have produced this report about building resilience in schools. The DFE and PSHE Association have produced this about helping teachers know about teaching mental health and emotional well-being. Some detail there, I won't go into it, and I'm sure we can make all of this available for you. And also some information about, well, if you are a school that wants to have counselling available, what should you be looking at? How can you make this work best for your school? So there are some resources now that are being put out. And I have a feeling that all of you here are persuaded of these factors. I wasn't quite sure whether that needed to be a persuasion or not, but I think that you're all already convinced about the gains from thinking about emotional well-being and emotional resilience. But there is actual research which shows that there are good impacts for the child, for their educational attainment, and for the school. And this is some of the research that indicates those things. So just before I finish, I want to go through a little bit about what works for schools and what are schools doing now. Just about some ideas, which I'm sure many of you here have probably got other and better ideas. I'm hearing every day of new schemes and new initiatives that schools are using. And I think one of the things that we are doing is collecting these, because we use them in our work as well, which I'll say a little bit about. Whole school approaches, as I've said, it's been shown to increase attainment, reduce bullying, helps work with students who have got problems, creates a school ethos that promotes well-being and connectedness. I can't speak too strongly about having that whole school approach. Having a curriculum that integrates social and emotional skills, and it's looking at across the curriculum, it's not just in PSHE, it's where else can examples be used about this. For instance, thinking about biology and development. Involve peers, but also involve parents, shown to be hugely important. Supporting school staff. I was really pleased this morning that Caroline talked about the impact on teachers and their own mental health. It absolutely mirrors our experience, and often they need support too. Target extra help appropriately. There's something about how do you actually review your school and the specific problems that might be emerging within the young people in your school, and how might you target some help for those specific problems. And then the relationship with external services has been shown in the TAMS evaluation, which again, some of you may know about the funding that was available up until 2011. One of the key things in secondary schools was not so much the availability of counselling, but the connection with CAMS, having that good relationship, being able to get advice, being able to make referrals, the CAMS then informing the school about what they might be able to do to support that child coming back into school, was found to be the most impactful help that could be done. These are some thoughts and ideas about what actually happens in schools and what schools are doing. And this comes from our bond project that we carried out several years ago, which I believe the author is here in the audience, or one of the authors is here in the audience. And this is some of the ways that they're actually delivered. Beating bullying programs, circle time and nurture groups, drama and art groups, consultation and guidance, friendship building programs, using PSHE as we said, and then some of the counselling programs like where there is Place to Be, where there's a whole program that integrates with the school and with local services, but also staff training and awareness raising. These are all evidence-based methods that are all shown to have a positive impact on the whole school approach. Young Minds has increasingly worked with schools over recent years, and some of the things that we do is again training to help all the school staff, not just teachers, but all the staff at the school are crucial and important. Children and young people may turn to anybody in that school, whoever they feel comfortable talking to. So actually it needs a generic understanding about mental health and about emotional well-being and about spotting problems. Helping schools review their strengths and weaknesses and devise ways and strategies to meet those needs. And providing evidence-based information and suggestions of techniques and strategies for schools, as well as helping them connect into CAMS. And I think one of the themes as well of our work is co-production, both at the school, but also with young people. Young people are the school, and involving them in what develops and what they think would work best for them, again, keeps their engagement and is shown to be critical. And finally, we bring this all together within an approach which we call academic resilience. And this really is about how we bring together a whole school approach and how we can make sense of it for schools and for the school staff team. And we have on our website, it's a plethora of free resources so that you can do this for yourselves if you would like, or if that's easier. And we are a partner with the University of Brighton and Boing Boing, which is a social enterprise, to actually develop the research base around this. And it's adapting an approach around resilient therapy to actually a school environment, about what is it that a school needs to audit, what is it that's going on in our school, what are the specific issues, and what do we need to look at that's actually going to help us as a staff group, but also our community of our school. So this is what it means. Schools promoting it involves strategic planning and detailed practice. I won't go on. And this is just a quote from King's College in Guildford, who adopted this. And they felt it really started a transformation, that it opened a door that gave permission to the staff team to actually, it's okay for them to show that they care. So we're designing and implementing systems that really support the whole person. And since October, they've launched 26 new initiatives under the Resilience banner. It's quite a lot. Altogether, these changes and developments will lead to a bigger and brighter future for the young people in our school. What we've found is it really shifts that, in the main, teachers and schools really believe that they want the whole of their pupils to be happy, and that it's going to help the attainment of them as well. But I think there has been a compression and a forcing around attainment, and a sense of guilt or shame that we shouldn't do this other area. Again, I think the audience here is already convinced of the value, but for many schools, they don't feel that this is what they should be focusing on, and somehow we need to convince them that there is huge gains to be had by thinking about children as the whole person, and that it's going to help not just that individual, but the whole school and actually the whole of their future in terms of their outcomes. And so here's a little bit of information if you would like to take that to find out more from our website, but also the parent helpline. If you want to give that number to anybody, please do. Thank you very much.